And then people started evolving. They became this and that. So then now it went all jiu-jitsu guys were winning. Then all of a sudden the kickboxers started knocking out the jiu-jitsu guys. Then they started getting a little better and morphing into, now it's the fighter. It's not the style anymore.
Hello, welcome. This is James Cox with the Martial Arts Lifestyle, and this is episode number 51. Man, I'm very excited today to have a special guest. This is the one and only legendary John Hackleman, the Pitmaster. You've been around MMA long enough, you're gonna know who John Hackleman is. So I had the privilege of training at some early training camps that he had offered back when Chuck Liddell was still in his prime. And Mr. Hackleman, sir, man, it's good to have you here. Why don't you maybe introduce yourself and tell us some things about what you have going on?
Hey, thanks. My name's John Hackleman. I'm a karate guy, an old karate guy now, but still training guys. 97, almost 98 now, percent of what I do, time and energy, revolves around Hawaiian Kempo and keeping people safe on the street and in a schoolyard. But then the 2%, 2.5%, I still train some UFC fighters, some MMA fighters, and that's kind of a hobby I've always had that happened to take off when a couple of guys were just training in my backyard hit the top of the top. So we became kind of well known for that, even though that's always been a small part of my curriculum and my bandwidth. My bandwidth revolves mainly around Hawaiian Kempo for the street, or the schoolyard, and it's an offshoot of Kajukembo, but a lot of similarities, but a lot of differences. And I've been doing that since 1985. I came up with Hawaiian Kempo because I didn't want to keep the name Kajukembo, but I keep it as part of my history, but not part of my everyday teaching. I guess when it comes to curriculum, I don't know, I wouldn't feel genuine using that name too much because I don't keep up with its traditions, but I'm still a karate guy, period. That's it, karate guy.
So you kept the traditions you think that are the most valuable pressed anyway for us to evolve, to change, to improve, and to use, Bruce Lee's concepts of using what works for you, right?
Grandmaster Imperato promoted me to Grandmaster. And he knew, my instructor, Godin, knew what I was doing and supported me 100%. In fact, he came to a couple of my early black belts. Like, he was there when I promoted Chuck to black belt. And that was before Chuck was Chuck. That was in the 90s, Professor Godin loved what I was doing. And he was my immediate instructor. So I think I got their okay, to do what I'm doing, Imperato and Godin, before they passed away. So I feel good about what I'm doing, and I feel I'm good with the Kajukembo community. I think I'm a good spokesperson for the Kajukembo community. I mean, I started in Honolulu, Hawaii, 1970, so not much more realistic than that, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I would agree. I'm pretty sure you have the blessing and the validation there to do your thing and focus more on the Hawaiian Kempo part, right? So what is so different with what you're doing now? If it's just the comparison with the traditional and the modern, if you want to call it those two, the evolution and Hawaiian Kempo versus Kajukembo, what are you doing that is so different?
I think I took out anything that I feel isn't effective for the street. And I never, even at 10 years old, I love katas. I love them, but I knew they weren't effective for the street. You can pack it with the word bunkai all you want, but when you're spending time teaching katas, which takes, they're repetitive and they're a lot of memorization. They take a long time. Every hand movement, stance has to be exactly the same. But every minute you're teaching one of them in your class, you are taken away from real martial arts, real self-defense. You're taking that time away from your students. So as an instructor, if you're teaching that to your kids, that's going to take up so much time. It's hard enough just teaching them how to really fight. So if you're taking any time away from that by teaching some kind of movement that does, that does some kind of weird thing that makes absolutely no sense, but it was, it looked cool back in the day and people just bring it along, then you're doing your students a serious disservice. I mean, your parents, I mean, it's a big responsibility when they come to you for martial arts, the parents or the adult students. And if you're teaching them that, I mean, how can you even look at them in the face? I mean, and because you're not teaching me, well, what does that have to do with defending yourself? Well, this I pretend is this, and then this I pretend is this, and we call it bunkai. And it's just it's rubbish. It's what it is rubbish, and you're taking the money. You're doing a disservice to your students, I feel, and so I took that away because of that. My students come to me because they want to stay safe in the schoolyard and increase their confidence for kids. They want to stay alive on the street and be able to then defend their family. That's the adults. Or they want to win a UFC title. That's the fight team. So I might as well teach my fight team kata if I'm going to teach the guys who, are training for the street. Same difference. It's gonna do either one about the same amount as good. It does absolutely no good. So why wouldn't I teach my fight team kata if I'm going to teach my street guys kata, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. We took kata out probably about 10 years ago ourselves. I mean, again, I grew up, after you, but Kajukembo, where kata was a required curriculum. And we had 3 forms per belt that we would learn, the original pinyons and all of that. And
it just, there's no reason. I just started thinking I'm stealing time, valuable time away. And then some of the guys that do it, like some of the newer MMA stars, like Wonderboy Thompson, okay, great fighter, or Lyoto Machida, great fighter. They love katas, but let's not forget their fathers started training them when they were little kids, and that's all they've done in their life. Lyoto Machida and Stephen Wonderboy Thompson grew up only doing martial arts. So they had, 12 hours a day to just do martial arts every day, 7 days a week. So they can practice the fighting and the kata, and they could throw in other things too, because that's all they did. But your average student, you got 2 hours a week with them, 2 hours, and an hour and a half if it's a kid a week. So you don't have 12 hours to be going through all the fighting and all the kata. You only got time for one or the other, and one is going to have to, one is going to suffer if you spend more time on the other. So I'm not going to teach my student how to do a stance like this and take away the fighting. We only have 2 hours a week on the average student.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's the best use of the time, the best service that you're going to give. I mean, you only have so much time. It takes a lot of time to develop kata properly. Like you're saying, you could use that same time, man, do some kickboxing, do some jiu-jitsu, do some bag work, teaching everything a practical sense.
And I just remember back in the day when I was sparring, it was so easy to catch people with left hooks because their right hand was here and their front hand was here. So I could hit them with, you can never get your hand all the way up here when I'm throwing the left hook, or anyone is. So if your hand's not up here, if your hands aren't up here, there's something maybe that I don't know. Maybe there's some kind of secret. And then all of a sudden, guys that are sticklers on it, and they're not going to give, so they make up that word bunkai, right? Have you heard the word bunkai?
The hidden technique, yeah.
Yeah. So they're saying, no, when your hand is here, oh, wait, hold on. I got to tell you, when your hand is here, it's because you pulled someone here. You're holding them here. They make up just as they go along. It's like a fairy tale. I love watching kata, but I love watching pop locking too. And they both belong to be watched, but not in a curriculum of martial arts when you're trying to teach people how to either save their life or have more confidence in the schoolyard.
I agree. So with your more modern approach and the things that you're doing, it's cool that you can, it's like you get these fight gyms that want to develop a group of UFC fighters, right? So they're on the daily pressing the fight gym, the fight gym. But you may have the same people. I remember walking into your school the first time, and man, I was so excited. I mean, a big fan of Chuck Liddell, and my expectations is I would walk in with all this, I don't know, fame and glory, home of Chuck Liddell, and he was in the class running just like all the other little students, doing the same things. And you had the majority of them were not fighters, right? The majority of your students now.
He would train with a regular class alongside him. And then when he
Yeah.
started making it, the students would be like, they're used to him. So then
Yeah.
he'd be on the side of them hitting the bag, and they'd be like, so when I had UFC stars coming in, they were just so used to it already. My regular students were used to just training with some of the top guys, so
Yeah.
they just kind of
Yeah,
got
that's cool.
spoiled. Some of my students got spoiled. They grew up with that.
Yeah,
So
he was recognized as one of the most recognized athletes in the world, man. The mohawk and the image and the early UFC and all of that stuff. And then these guys were just training, doing push-ups right next to him. And they were just, beginner belts and things like that. Yeah, that's pretty cool. But although you may be more known outside of your community for the UFC fighters, inside your community, you're not so much about a bunch of UFC fighters, right? So what you're saying is that you keep a small fight team and you focus more on the martial arts side of the other aspects.
yeah, 97, 98% of what I do is Hawaiian Kempo for the street or the schoolyard, and then the 2.5% is for the fighters, and using UFC and the techniques are 98% the same for the street or the MMA, but then there's some differences. I teach a lot of gouging and eye poking and stuff like that for my Hawaiian Kempo, but then I teach more armbar type, more jujitsu. Like jujitsu is a sport. It's not really for the street. It's a sport, just like taekwondo. Olympic taekwondo is for the sport. It's an Olympic sport. I mean, wrestling, freestyle wrestling is for sport, and you can use some of it for the street. But if you just go in with any one element of martial arts, then you're at a disadvantage. So you try to include all of them, and a big part of the elements that go into martial arts would be conditioning. A lot of people neglect that, and then they go to different gyms for their strength and conditioning instead of just teaching it right there. I mean, they don't go to other gyms. And then some people, they go to the other gym for jujitsu, then they go to the other gyms for their Hawaiian, their wrestling. Then they go to Muay Thai gyms and they do Muay Thai, even though it's not really Muay Thai. But it sounds better to say Muay Thai than it does just striking, right? Because then they're Muay Thai. And then they throw in for the street, they go Krav Maga. So now they got a little of everything, so they can flavor it out there for everyone because they want name recognition instead of just being true to their one martial art. They bring in all the other bigger names, and I think we're lucky because we didn't need to have that bigger name. We are the name. I'm not bragging about that. It's just we're known for teaching everything, so we don't have to outsource.
Right, right.
That's a good
That
word.
makes
Outsource.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're teaching mixed martial arts, but yeah,
I'm
that's funny,
teaching,
right?
yeah, and but I'm teaching Hawaiian Kempo because mixed martial arts is a sport. It'd be like teaching boxing or MMA or Olympic uh, Taekwondo. Those are sports, and they're great sports for the street. You get hit with someone a left hook, boom, you got them. But now the boxing part doesn't address anything about takedowns. So what if someone's taking you down? Oh well, I'll go to a wrestling guy and learn that. Okay. Well, what if you hit the ground now? You got a position. Well, I'll go to the jujitsu school down the street. You know, well, what about if the fight lasts longer than 20 seconds? You got to work on your anaerobic metabolism. Well, I'll go to the fitness gym over there. So it's like they're going to 5 different gyms just so they can stay safe on the street or win a UFC title. So we want everything to be self-contained.
Yeah, all inclusive, right?
Everything there
So
together.
we try to do that. Yeah.
No, that makes sense, man. Yeah, it's funny that people do that. You know how people name drop certain names, a celebrity's name? It's like they do that with styles too. I do Muay Thai instead of saying they do kickboxing or Krav Maga. Yeah, whatever might be popular or trendy. That
It's a
is.
flavor of the month. And
funny.
when I was coming up, the flavor of the month was Kung Fu. And every karate school, yeah, we do Shaolin Kung Fu, or we do this, and we do all this Kung Fu. Then it was cardio kickboxing. Yeah, we do cardio kickboxing. And they did punch the bag. It was the same thing. And then all of a sudden, Krav Maga. Everybody did Krav Maga. It's like there's like what style? Well, there's like 8 different styles because Krav Maga doesn't really mean there's no real style of Krav Maga. It depends on which one came from Israel at the time. So I do Krav Maga. Yeah, I take the gun away. I take the gun away, and you know. So then it became BJJ. And every school, traditional karate, taekwondo schools, yeah, we do BJJ. So I don't know. It's just like, to me, it's flavor of the month, and we just Hawaiian, we're the pit Hawaiian Kempo, bing, that's it.
No, I get it, man. That makes sense. Using what works. So, talk to me about like UFC from then to now. What was the first UFC fight? Do you remember the number? Which fight that you were at?
I have no idea. I remember I had a couple guys in my backyard, and then there was these fighting coming along, and so we had to change up the training because there was going to be a lot of wrestlers, and then Chuck was, this, and next thing you know, we're going to. I think the first fights were like in either San Jose or maybe the Valley, like Fresno or something, and then next thing I know, Vegas. There's this huge fight in Vegas, and Chuck just once it snapped, it never came back. Then all of a sudden it was just huge after that. So
what's the biggest changes? I mean, with the growth of UFC and MMA in the world, like there's pros and cons, right? Like let's think about the early fights you went to then and to these, we had a fight last weekend, to these later fights now. What are pros and cons and the absolute biggest changes because of that growth has been so fast?
You mean for the UFC or how it affected us?
Early UFC to current UFC, the differences really.
It's I think the only difference really is the fighters are getting better and better and better because they're evolving. But everything else to me is, I mean, obviously some rules have changed. The look has changed. The branding has changed. To me, it's the same as it was back in, 1976 when there was anything goes matches in Hawaii. And I remember 16 years old training for it, and it was so many similarities, but so different now.
Yeah. So I just got busy, right? I mean, heck, I can't even keep up with it now. And the roster is huge, but I do see improvements. I remember early UFC fighters, boxers would dog them because their boxing was bad. Right? Well, because they weren't just boxing, because they're doing MMA. They got to worry about kicking and takedowns and jiu-jitsu. But now they've definitely, it seems like overall the skills are a lot more improved.
It's gone in cycles. Like at first, because the jiu-jitsu guy, I love Royce Gracie. I love him. I think he's one of the pioneers of all martial arts. But I mean, it was made for him. It was made by the jiu-jitsu guys. I mean, the Gracies did the UFC, so they kind of, they flavored the rules around to fit them. And it wasn't really jiu-jitsu because Brazilian jiu-jitsu is a sport. So they added the striking defense and stuff like that. So they kind of made it, they labeled it BJJ, but it was more Valley Judo, and then because anything goes. And it was, I think it was great. But it was more, each person was either this or that. And then people started evolving. They became this and that. And so then now it went, all jiu-jitsu guys were winning. Then all of a sudden, the wrestlers came in and they started doing better. No, the kickboxers started knocking out the jiu-jitsu guys. Then the wrestlers were taking the kickboxers down. Then they started getting a little better and morphing into, now it's the fighter. It's not the style anymore. There's no style. that's better than the other, because
Yeah.
every style has been shown how great it is and shown how vulnerable it is at the same time. So
Mm.
now there is no one thing, like I call mine Hawaiian Kempo. Bruce Lee called it Jeet Kune Do. I don't know any other style that does it. Most styles still keep their own. Like, yeah, I do Shotokan plus BJJ, so I don't know. I don't know. It's just fighting to me.
Yeah, that's true. Used to be very separated. Now it's all together, and now it's more about the athlete, right? You said about the fighter, but also the athlete because he's
Yeah, yeah.
He's more athletic.
Some
He's in
guys are
better
standing.
shape.
Some instructors, they won't like budge on it. Like they want to keep these mysterious bunkai traditions, and they want to, because they want to try to please someone, like be, I want to keep my traditions because the Grand Master from like 1622 AD would have liked that. And I don't think you're being true to anyone if you're doing that, especially your students.
yeah, dinosaurs left for a reason. We can't necessarily drive the same cars that we drove, and
Yeah, we don't
1900
churn butter anymore outside. We don't go,
yeah,
we just buy it. We don't churn the
yeah.
butter, and we don't, there's a lot of things that I love old school training just more than anyone I know. And I keep a lot of my old school attitudes and cultures and traditions. I mean, we still go to Hawaii for our black belt every year, and we do Wilhelmina Rise, which I was doing in the early 70s. We do Cocoa Head stairs. We do, all these workouts I used to do back in the day, because I keep those traditions. But while I bring in those traditions, I've taken out the ones that I felt didn't really weren't good for my students.
Yeah, so many memorized drills. We've done a lot of the same thing. A lot of that I got from you, John, early on. So I appreciate it and I see it. But yeah, martial arts is funny, right, man? There's some crazy things out there. What's some of the craziest things you've seen in martial arts? The dim mak. We talk about all kinds of crazy things that people just get delusional about. Some martial arts can be almost cult-like. It can be political. It can be religious. It can. I bet you've seen some crazy things.
I think like that. Speaking of Dimmack, what's the guy's name that from the movie Kumite?
Is it Frank Dukes?
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
I remember dealing with him and his stuff, and it was kind of wild. And me and Cecil Peoples had a little thing with Frank Dukes because he was bad mouthing our school way back. This is like the early 70s, man. I remember that kind of stuff. But then they had the touch stuff. But I've never really seen that. I see it on the internet or I heard about it. But my evolution and what really bothered me and what I see more, even more than the crazy dim mock stuff, is keeping your hand over here and being able to explain it. Like keeping your hand here and then explaining it, like why you would keep your hand here in a
Mm-hmm.
fight. I mean, that's the craziest. It might be a minor thing, but it's like it's so
Yeah.
crazy to me and it's so weird to me. That's this replaces the dim mak, like why people still do crazy stances and katas in this day and age. That's my dim mak. That's what,
Yeah.
like, a lot of people think the death touch. Like I think that's crazy because people know that dim mak's crazy, so they kind of but I don't know, I'm not trying to fight it. I'm just trying to. I want everybody to be safe. I want everybody to be safe in the street. I want everybody to be able to protect themselves. I want everybody to protect their family in these crazy days right now. I want every student that's in school to be able to have confidence and nobody pick on them. That's my goal. And when I see stuff that's counterproductive to that, it makes me angry because I'm in martial arts and that's how I identify. That's my gender. I identify as a martial artist.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. All right. I like that. I like that.
But you get it. I mean, now I'm going
I
to be
do.
canceled for saying that, but I identify as a martial artist. And it bothers me when I see not real martial arts being portrayed as effective martial arts, because then it's going to get people hurt out there.
You're bold enough to be genuine and step up and say, I know tradition says this is the way it's supposed to be done because that's the way it was done 2,000 years ago. But there's some logic behind, instead of your hand being at your hip, being in front of your face. You can still develop discipline to keep your hand in one place while the other one is out. You can still get push-pull, but you also can be able to block a lot better by having your hand in the right place. So it's like logic. You're like there's some common sense in what we really should do. And those times were great. It worked for me, but there's a different time.
And when Godin was a street guy, my instructor Godin, I mean, he was the Cobra Kai guy. I mean, he was the street guy. I mean, getting in fights all the time. He was in and out of prison. My instructor I love Walter Godin, and without him in my life, I don't know where I'd be. But he committed a lot of crimes, and he did a lot of bad things to a lot of people, and I accept that, and I love him. But he was, even him in the katas, when he'd do the kata, and I'd say, why is our hand over here? Shouldn't it be over here? He would just look at me at 10 years old. He would look at me and go, shut the up. Put your hand where I tell you to put it. You put it here. When you get your black belt, put it wherever you want. And he knew I was right even then, but he was trying to carry on the katas. Even he didn't seem like the type that did that, but he did, and did the katas and the taiokas and the grab arts and the punch tricks and all that. And then when I took it out, I thought he'd be mad. And he was like, I love it. I wish I could have done it. I wish I did it that way. So he actually flew up from Hawaii and did Chuck's black belt test. And he came up for another black belt test. And we met in Vegas once. I don't know if we did a black belt test there, but he died a couple months after that. So before he died, and you know what? He called me and he said, meet me in Vegas. There was a tournament over there, a Kajukempo something. So we went over there, and I brought Chuck over and Ian, my other black belt. I brought like 5 of my black belts over there, and we met up with them, and we got to say our goodbyes, even though we didn't know he was going to die in a couple months. But we actually got to see him and hang out with him, and then he died like a couple months later.
Yeah, but he saw that what you did and was like,
he did. He loved it.
He's glad you did it. Yeah.
I got a picture of him watching me testing Chuck for his black belt, and we're both on the ground punching each other, and Godin was like loving it. He loved the physicalities that I've created and the way that you had to do the conditioning. He never did that in his testing. And the way we sparred, really, like realistically, as much as you can without killing each other. He loved it, and that makes me feel good that Godin loved the direction I took, what he taught me.
Right. Now you just continue to pay that forward. So, well, man, you're doing some great things all over. When you talk about conditioning, again, I was lucky to go to meet you. I don't even remember the year. It's been a long time, but it was one of your first big 1 week long training camps. And Chuck was still in his prime. Glover had just moved there, I believe, and I didn't know what I was getting into. I was competing in kickboxing and point fighting, and a little younger, and just loved mixed martial arts. I loved Chuck and MMA, and you introduced me to those crazy things at the time. I mean, we were flipping tires, using sledgehammers, running the D-ball mile, throwing this big medicine ball uphill. We did burpees 10,000 ways, and we trained for 7 days all day. I don't want to exaggerate. I feel like we started about 8 or 9 in the morning, went to about 5. We got to go watch the fighters out at your house, train that night. And that was some of the best times of my life. I was so sore. I was so sore. I was more prepared for the second, the third, and the fourth week that I'd spent there. But you're still doing all that conditioning. And I remember the people. I actually remember your dad was there doing some training with us and working out. And that was crazy. So, and how do you stay fit? And I know you're working along with your wife and other people. Like, I don't know if you want to call it fitness over 50 or whatever. But talk to us about conditioning, and maybe even more specifically, conditioning as you get older.
Yeah, conditioning is it's you got striking, you got grappling, which is once the fight hits the ground. That's what I consider grappling. You got wrestling. That's either taking your opponent down or preventing him from taking you down. That's all it is. And then you have conditioning, right? So that's the only aspect of striking, wrestling, grappling. Those are the only, that's all you got. There's nothing else in martial arts. And then conditioning. The conditioning oversees everything. You can be the best grappler in the world, and if you're tired, you can't grapple anymore. If you're the fastest Ferrari on the street and you're out of gas, you're not going anywhere. No matter how good your striking is, if you're your average fight time is 20 seconds in the street, and then you're exhausted with all the adrenaline, because your adrenaline dumps. Like when you hit the bag, your adrenaline goes up a little bit, very little. Then when you drill, it goes up a little more. Now you get into a fight that's in a sport with a referee, and you're in the dressing room going into the cage or the ring, your adrenaline really pumps up. So you get a lot more tired sparring than you do hitting the bag, but you get a lot more tired actually fighting in the contest than you do hitting the bag or sparring, right? Now you add a life or death street fight situation. Somebody attacks you in the street, your adrenaline goes through the roof. It's like 100 times more than fighting in a cage or a ring. And with that adrenaline dump comes anaerobic metabolism, and you get tired a lot quicker. You get tired in like 20 seconds. In the cage, you can tie, you kind of pace it, and a sport fight, you can pace a lot more. Some of them go a lot harder, but the adrenaline isn't the same, because in the back of your mind, you're not, they're not trying to kill you, they're trying to beat you. In the street, in the back of your mind, they're trying to kill you. So, our brains, since we're, cavemen, our adrenaline pumps up so we can defend our life. So without that anaerobic metabolism, we get tired a lot quicker, and we're done, in 20, 30 seconds. So training to me is like, the kata gives you great conditioning, and we all know that's bull. You need high intensity anaerobic workouts, because that's the way a street fight's going to be. So some people say, well, I'll spar really hard. Then you'll be punch drunk in about a year, and you'll always have cuts all over your face, and you won't be able to remember your kid's name. So what we do, well, I'll grapple really hard. Then you'll always have a torn labrum, dislocated shoulder, and a torn MCL. So if you go really hard at any combative technique, you're going to hurt someone or get hurt. So that's why cops don't actually practice with real bullets when they're doing games, and knife fighters don't use real sharp knives when they're doing knife drills. It's because you'll die, right? So sparring's the same way. You want to go really, really hard to get the anaerobic. You want to be as close as a real fight as you can without being in a real fight. Because if you spar really hard, like I said, you'll be punch drunk and you'll always be injured. So to do that, we get anaerobic metabolism helpers like burpees. That way you do a lot of burpees, and your anaerobic metabolism goes up. Then all of a sudden you throw someone on the bag, so they're used to punching. Then you throw them in with a partner, and you do like really hard drills where you're getting the muscle memory going. But without getting that anaerobic, and that's what people don't like, and that's what people do the least, because it's uncomfortable. People don't want to be uncomfortable. People are soft and weak, that's what we are. We're that way. Just that's the way we are normally, but you have to break out of that, and you have to go into the anaerobics phase if you want to become a successful martial artist. Imagine not doing that with my fight team. Then all of a sudden they get in the cage, and after a minute into the first round, they'll be hands on their knees, just, panting. And that's okay. The referee will stop the fight. You just lost. But if that happens in the street, right, you're not going to wake up. And if you do, it'll be 6 months later in a nursing home with a tracheostomy and brain damage. And your wife will be the neighbor. like she probably does now when I go out of town.
But that's another episode, right?
But
Oh,
anyway, you get my point. That's what we do.
I definitely get your point. Yeah, conditioning is as probably more important after you can get to that level of fitness. If two fighters are very equal, typically, usually the one in better shape is going to win.
Right.
And then, but
Conditioning.
you can go all over with that. That oversees everything else. Because if you're not a good grappler, right, then you can stay off the ground by punching him more. Work on takedown defense. So you work on something else. If you're not a good striker, get that takedown quick. Go, go, go. Fake a shot, take a shot. Fake a shot, take a shot. Right. And if you're not a good wrestler, right, then you get them to the ground real quick with a punch, and then you submit them. But if your conditioning isn't there, you can't do anything.
Can't do anything.
It takes all your other tools, all your other weapons away. So that's where the condition is. You got the grappling, striking, wrestling over here, but the conditioning is over all of them, because without them, you can't do anything else. If you take one of them away and you still have the conditioning, you can still win. If you took two away and just gave them one, they might be able to win. A left hook. Imagine if Tyson was fighting. I bet you he could knock a lot of people out with a left hook before they even thought about taking him down, right? But then if they avoided that punch a couple times and he didn't have any conditioning, now he couldn't do anything. Right. So that's where that is.
Yeah, it's like your backup, right? You need that in the reserve always, just in case. Keep your gas tank full.
People don't like to admit it, but that's the most important element of fighting is the conditioning, because it's not like, yeah, it's that counter left hook. That's what or that takedown, or that's omoplata, so it's not sexy. It's not like, why you do this? The conditioning is king.
Yeah. I
So
agree,
people
man.
leave it out of their curriculum. That's what you test on at our gym. That's how we test to the next belt.
Yeah, people leave it out because they're probably not in shape themselves.
Oh yeah, a lot of the grandmasters, you could tell they haven't trained in a while.
Man, I know you got a lot going on. So having you on my podcast is kind of like you may have felt when you had Tony Robbins on your podcast. But I know you have some past with Tony, and he had came down and worked with Chuck early on and some things like that. But that was pretty cool, man. I caught that episode when you had Tony Robbins as a guest.
What's going on
and I was on Joe Rogan.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I missed that one.
Joe Rogan's, and then I had Tony Robbins.
I got to find the one with Joe. I missed that one.
Yeah, I think it's episode 444.
444. Yeah.
I think you remember that because there's 3 4s.
That's easy. Well, tell us about I don't know, maybe something about Tony Robbins and your podcast. What you're doing with it, because you got a lot going on.
My podcast I was doing with my buddy. He's a doc. He's an orthopedic surgeon, and we had this one called Pitmaster in the Doc, and we were talking about sports series and different. Usually the fight that week we do, because we both love MMA. But he got really busy because he has like 4 kids, and he's a orthopedics, and he went for his black belt. He just got his black belt last month. So I just didn't do one for a while because we were too busy. And then my wife and I have been getting into so many social issues and politics lately that we decided we just got to get it out. Instead of holding it in, we want to get it out. And we're like, do we really want to talk about politics? We're a martial arts gym. But you know what? We said, yeah. If they don't like our politics, and they don't think it's worth coming to our gym, then so.
I mean, if you're going to talk about kata, you might as well talk about politics.
Might as well. It's the same. I was talking about kata once at a super show in Vegas. I was doing a seminar, and I was talking about kata, and I brought that up about I was talking about pop locking and how I love to pop lock and I love to watch kata, but neither one belongs in a core curriculum of martial arts school. And I had like almost half the people walk out.
Oh.
and then the owner of Century was sitting in my seminar, And he was just looking at me, shaking his head. I was like, oh shit, here we go. I up, but
Yeah.
whatever. So now with my wife, we were opposites. So our thing is called the Hacklemans opposites attract, because we were the opposite on politics, and now we're not. We're just talking about the challenges and how we had to deal with the whole Corona thing and the BLM thing, because they did a little march on our in our town. You'd never think it was BLM, because we were called racist because we didn't want the BLM. I didn't want them burning my gym. I had nothing to do with race, and they were all white. Everybody that was doing it in our town was white. And it was like, wait, this is a what march is this? And they were
Right.
like going, yeah, you hate the police. They're just, it was so bizarre. And I just didn't want them burning down my school. That's all. So we had a couple guys with guns there that just, in case they got crazy, sometimes these, cute little college students that are, they're so oppressed, and they're, mommy and daddy credit cards that they're buying all the stuff with, but they want to help. They want to help the people, they want to be there, they're going to help out, so they did the BLM march, and they just kind of walked by our gym and nothing happened. But the fact that we had guns on the roof and we were prepared for anything in case they tried to. I mean, the week before our little BLM thing, Long Beach had a real BLM march, and they burned down a 10th Planet Jiu-Jitsu school. So I saw that in the news, and I was like, so they're not really just trying to steal things, they're just trying to destroy things.
Yeah.
So I wanted my gym protected. So I had a couple of my students on the roof, we had the guns, and it turned into a huge thing, much bigger than I thought it would. And our gym has never been busier since then.
Yeah, yeah. No, I remember all of that. Yeah. So I mean, if anything, created maybe a more need for self-defense,
Yeah,
that attention, and for fitness and health.
a little bit. I mean, for the BLM thing, protection, and then for the Corona thing, yeah. How about not being, fat and completely out of shape, and then complaining why we're still open and not wearing them, people wearing a mask? It's like, so we're just looking, thinking, are you really? Is this really happening? It's like, you can't be serious. We had people telling us, criticizing us that, even though it was proven time and time and time again, physical conditioning, good physical conditioning and health was like the main thing, more important than anything else. And we had these sloppy looking, out of shape people telling us, oh, you're not doing the mask. Oh, you're this and this. And we're like, yeah, no mirrors at your house? Is there, are we missing something here? So my wife and I were just like, wait a second, I just had this. So we discuss things like that a lot in our podcast, and just how just crazy the world has become, not only for the Corona thing, but also you need more self-defense now than you've ever needed, right?
Well, let me close with a couple of quick questions here. If I asked your favorite UFC fighter, maybe past and present, of course, you have Chuck Liddell, you have Glover Teixeira, amazing. Two of my absolute favorites, not just saying that. Who would be your favorite, maybe past and present fighter?
And why?
That's not mine. That's not mine.
That's not yours, yes, sir.
That would be, man, there's a lot of them. I'm going to go with Hoist Gracie,
Just for pioneering it and
the pioneer. I mean, he just went in with anyone. He was 170 pounds. He was fighting 270 pounders. My
Yeah.
favorite all time, my favorite all time fighter was probably Benny the Jet.
yeah.
So I got that, and yeah, so there's that.
And overall, just because the tenacity and just the things that you saw, right? I mean, these are your best fighters for what reasons?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite fighter, I think my favorite two, like, would be Benny and Hoist Gracie, just because they're the pioneers. They went in there when no one else would, doing things no one else would do. And now, there's so many great fighters. Obviously, Chuck and Glover, and were they went all the way to the top, but there's so many. Glover's has a pit affiliated gym in Connecticut, and we test our black belts together. And we got guys like Ramsey Nijum in Salt Lake. He got a pit in Salt Lake City, and he's doing great things with his students. And Court McGee is training guys, and we have so we have that going right now. We have a pit in Idaho with Cruz Gomez. We got the pit Malibu with Rick, who's been with me since 1985. Rick Metzler. So we got some, really good. We got Antonio Banuelos, running the pit. San Luis, remember, he was fighting. He fought UFC, WEC, Strike Force, So we have that, and it's not the MMA experience that really means that much to me. It's their Hawaiian Kempo that got them to be that good at MMA, and now they can teach the Hawaiian Kempo part to their students, right? I mean, how much more credibility do you have to have? You know what I mean? So
right.
The techniques that they teach, it's been proven time and time again. Kajukembo, the attitude and the culture of Kajukembo has been proven since the 1940s, but its techniques haven't been. You've never seen a guy in a fight do that effectively, but I have in a couple of the katas. We had the shooting star where I used to just shake my head and say, "Hey, Chief, do we have to keep doing this?" And my instructor, Godin, he'd always just shake his head. He goes, "Shut the up, just do it." He knew. So basically, he knew how ineffective it was, but he was carrying on that, the tradition from one person to the other, and then I stopped the tradition at my level of, the family tree, and it's not going to go any further on my side. And I think there's other Kajukembo guys that are seeing that light too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've done the same thing. So as long as people can keep improving. And well, man, you've created quite a legacy. I think the things you've done, the students you have, is so powerful. I mean, again, I acknowledge and appreciate you from the things that I've gotten from you as well, that I can carry and pass on to the kids and the adults, and self-defense and fitness and fighting and what we do in the martial arts. So, but man, I appreciate you talking with me. This has been something I've wanted to do for a while. And so, for best places for people to kind of find you, I know you have a course coming out on kata, right? So we're going to have that available to sell. But you do have some good courses. I know there's
your left
I got
hook
an
obsession.
online course. Just thepit.tv. That's it, thepit.tv.
Yeah, well, you guys find the Pit Master at thepit.tv, and you'll follow him all over. And John, I appreciate everything that you've done, and we'll continue to do. And I'll come and visit you soon, back to San Luis.
We're always there, brother. Thanks, bro.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.